Fairness statement. I was just about to compliment him, actually. Thank you very much, Laska Hirlock. Just before I start, Minister, as one of the three party leaders, the whole way in which this budget was leaked and the whole process by which that happens, it's insulting to this House. It's insulting to the Irish people, and it has to stop. Now, everybody may have been at it, but I think everybody knows it has to stop, because ultimately we are the representatives of the people. The farcical situation where we have documents in here that, quite rightly, the Cairlock and Laska Cairlock say we can't leave until the speeches are met. It's a joke. So it has to stop. And what's more, given what happened with the supposed, in inverted commas, Sapone-gate, FOI, text messages and all this sort of stuff, you're only creating a stick to beat yourselves with. Because somewhere along the line here, somebody has been messaging people to get this information out there. And if that becomes public, you'll all have big problems. Rightly so. So let this be the last. One message to take out of this before I get into my actual few comments. Please feed that back. Nobody wins, and politics falls and fails. The theme of the budget was recover, restore and renew. For me, it was more, you might like this, reduce, reuse and recycle. Reducing living standards due to inflation. Reuse the same old ideas that have failed in the past. Recycle the tax cuts and spending policies of the Hearn era. Half-baked plans, many of which have been announced already in train. I hoped that this budget would be a turning point. It was a once-in-a-generation opportunity, I would have thought, to make a difference as we all come out of COVID, but it's an opportunity lost. Instead, we got huge compromise, more of the same, from three political parties who cancelled one another out and, as a consequence, achieved very, very little. We saw over the COVID period a massive mobilisation of the power of the state, billions of euros committed to the health service and the preservation of lives, billions of euros to protect incomes and save jobs. Actions unprecedented. People now know that the state can act in a different way. We were able to build field hospitals, we were able to recruit, we were able to use technology in a way we didn't before. And that's the real reason why this budget is so disappointing. The people know the state can act when the political will is there, but here, obviously, political will has failed. This was the time to deliver a new deal for a fairer Ireland, but the opportunity has been lost. Instead of a universal public childcare system, we got piecemeal subsidies. Instead of truly free education, we got token gestures. Instead of the radical efforts to tackle climate change, the can was kicked down the road again. Instead of a rent freeze, there was more tax breaks for landlords. We put forward a plan to build 20,000 affordable and social houses, and we costed it. Instead, we got more of the same, no real vision for the future. A budget package of 4.7 billion, yet we still can't guarantee 10-year-old Adam Terry his scoliosis treatment, which I'm sure you know I raised in this House, and I know you referenced earlier, in fairness to you. What people will judge this government on is how it works to resolve the problems we all face and we all know. This is not a step in any way in the right direction. Instead of really tackling these problems and investing in the services people need, the government, in its wisdom, committed to 600 million in a full year to an untargeted tax cut. There's so much we could have achieved with that money. I spoke about Adam earlier and the number of other children who need certain surgeries, or requirements across the education sector, early years, childcare. It was totally unnecessary. And it spread so thinly that actually the people won't even notice it. But there was an ideological issue going on between the three government parties. And common sense and what's right by the people didn't come true. There's even an increase in the working from home relief. That means actually the state is picking up a bill that employers should be paying. That's a long way, Minister, from April, when your Green Minister was talking about a solidarity tax. What happened to Joe's idea? We were right behind him, supported it 100%. Calling for a one-off solidarity tax on the wealthiest. Did he do it just for headlines, or is it actually something you believe in? We've proposed a range of tax measures to raise €1 billion by closing down release and taxing wealth. Instead, those same people, the wealthiest in our society, will receive over €400 extra. They don't need it. There was no Donna O'Malley moment when it came to childcare. Next year, hopefully. The leaks in advance told us it would be €100 million for childcare. It was a lot less. People are sick of being told that this is a turning point in childcare. I heard it from previous ministers on numerous occasions. It hasn't happened. It's not happening. It's not working. The costs for parents are still a second mortgage. Cost of living has been a dominant issue since the Dáil returned, and I've flagged the cost of electricity and gas many times. I can guarantee you one thing, I can guarantee everybody in this House, unfortunately, a winter of discontent lies ahead, with soaring prices and supply chain problems. The €5 per week increase in social welfare payments doesn't go far enough to protect those on the lowest incomes. Since 2019, inflation has increased by 4.3%, and from the government's own figures, it predicted a rise by 3.7% next year. The budget spreads around a lot of fivers, but it doesn't insulate those on fixed incomes from mounting price rises. Job seekers of 203 a week had to rise by a minimum of €7.50 just to keep pace with inflation. The state pension needed to increase by €9.19 to keep pace. So when you look at the detail, prices are rising faster than incomes, so people will have less to spend on everyday essentials. That is just reality. Electricity and gas suppliers have already implemented multiple price increases that will cost households over €400 next year in higher bills. I do welcome the action to increase the fuel allowance, and I acknowledge the government took on board my call for increases to kick in from the budget. I acknowledge that. But only 30,000 extra households will qualify for the fuel allowance, a lot less than the 130,000 we proposed. With gas prices, they'll continue to soar, and the government couldn't guarantee we can now keep the lights on. In 2020, an extra 4 weeks of fuel allowance were paid. I would urge you again not to rule out providing the same this year, Minister, and please listen to what I've just said. Instead of tax cuts to the wealthiest, we in the Labour Party call for a refundable carbon tax credit of €200 for ordinary people. This will be capped at a household income of €50,000 and targeted those living with low energy rating. This was very necessary, Minister, in order to target those who will be most affected. The health budget is a masterpiece of distraction, an allocation next year of over €22 billion, but we still can't deliver scoliosis surgery for children. An extra 8,000 staff are due to be hired next year, we're told. We're also told there will be 16,000 last year, and also we're struggling to recruit across the board. And there doesn't seem to be a plan to resolve it. There are workers serving on the front line throughout this pandemic who still don't know where their position is going to be. We don't know how many consultants, how many nurses, how many public health nurses, midwives or healthcare assistants or psychologists or various other therapists are going to be provided for. And guess what? The Minister for Health cancelled the press conference to tell us. No, he hasn't told me. Oh, sorry. I wasn't aware of that. I was genuinely not aware of that. But we do still need to know the information. Other departments have told us how many teachers, for instance, they're going to have, how many Gardaí, how many SNAs. If we can figure out a pupil-teacher ratio for our schools, then we should be able to understand the staffing ratio we need across our hospitals, how many ICU beds we're going to have, and obviously take on board what the INMO have been saying, that 90% of their nurses are facing burnout. Over 900,000 people are on waiting lists. And the only solution that Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil and the Greens can agree on is to outsource people to the private sector. We will never develop the capacity or the skilled workforces we need if the approach is always continuously to pay private investors for access to for-profit healthcare. There will be an extra 250 million from waiting lists, of which 200 million goes to the HSE and another 50 million to the NTPF. Next year, 150 million will be spent on outsourcing public patients. We can't keep doing this, colleagues. The MPTF has been back now since 2017. First 20 million, then 55 million in 2018, 75 million in 2019, 100 million in 2020. We were told at the last budget it would be 130 million in 2021, and it's to be 150 million for next year. That's £500 million we are spending for public health care in private hospitals for profit, which we shouldn't be. That ship has to turn. Who's going to be brave enough to turn it? £500 million. It's not working. It's reinforcing prejudices. It's reinforcing the fact that people can get private care in public hospitals. People who have money can get health care, while those of those people who need it the most are sitting at the back of the queue. If you look at the closest Tier 1 hospital to me, UHL, we've opened extra beds, but there are still 91 people on trolleys on Tuesday, the highest since the start of the pandemic. To bridge the funding and staffing shortfall in Limerick is to bring it to the national average for a Model 4 hospital will cost 41 million. If we don't address that deficit, we'll never get on top of a waiting list. I welcome the funding that has been announced in relation to free contraception. It's something that we in the Labour Party have pursued for years. But also, Ministers, we need to look at how we're going to ensure that we support students during a very difficult time as regards going to college. And I would ask the Government, in relation to the measures that they have announced for students, as regards the €200 increase, the maintenance grants and the changes in the income limits, that they be backdated to last month, or some action be taken in relation to it. If you can't do the full thing, do a partial, because waiting for another year, a number of students will drop out because they won't have the means to stay in, and this would in some way help. There was also nothing for renters. Tax cuts for workers won't cover the expected rent increases they face next year. And the state, obviously, as I've said, is not building enough homes. The zoned land tax, and I heard what you said earlier on. How many years and how long is it going to take? 2 years down the road. But there is I've read it and I understand it. I brought in the first version of this. And I know about the limitations and I know everything, constitutional issues, and I've been down that road. And I'm with you on this. But a lot of the data and analysis is done already by local authorities. Why is it taking so long is my real question. I brought it in 2015, and I believe it should go up to 7% eventually. Considering Fine Gael have been in government for the last 5 years, it wasn't working during all that time. Why are they only getting around to fixing it now and looking at this? This levy should be brought in quicker. The data is there. The local authorities and relevant organisations have the data. I know. I've seen it. I know the structures that are put in place. For many, this budget was a huge disappointment. Everything was spread so thinly, Minister. It was a confetti budget that failed to deliver, really, for anyone. For those in our defence forces, it kicks to touch again the need for proper terms and conditions. It gives no certainty to those in healthcare that they will have jobs into the future. It gives no certainty as regards issues that our very, very talented childcare workers have. For those on low pay and minimum wage, it delivers little to meet the rising costs of living. The living wage of £12.90 is even further away for too many people. For young people out of work, there is barely an acknowledgement of the crisis they face. We need a new deal for a fairer Ireland. As I said at the start, what people will judge this government on is how it works to resolve the problems they face in their everyday lives. On work, on care, on climate and on housing, there was little to give them hope. This budget was an opportunity as we come out of COVID to face the people and say we are going to do things differently. To say that we are going to change and face the public and deal with the issues that they now prioritise after coming through such a pandemic. It was an opportunity. It's a missed opportunity. It's a budget that shows complete compromise across 3 parties. That means ultimately it delivers very little for anyone in this country. Thank you.
Social Democrats.